They found me on the security footage. That's what my daughter-in-law told me later, her voice shaking over the phone. She said she watched the clip 3 times before she believed it was really me. An old man in a blue linen shirt, sitting alone on a bench outside Terminal C of the Nashville International Airport, surrounded by nothing. No luggage, no wallet, no phone, just sitting there with his hands folded in his lap like he was waiting for a bus that was never going to come. That was me. And by the time that footage aired on Channel 4 News, my son already knew what he had done. But let me go back to the beginning, because the beginning matters. You need to understand what kind of man I was before that August afternoon, and what kind of family I thought I had, before any of the rest of this makes sense. My name is Gerald. I am 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer for the city of Memphis, Tennessee. I designed drainage systems, overpass supports, flood retention structures, the kind of work that nobody notices until it stops working. I was not a flashy man. I drove a Ford F-150 for 12 years before I replaced it. I wore the same style of New Balance shoes from 1997 until they stopped making that model. I paid my mortgage off in full by the time I was 54. I cooked my own meals, mowed my own grass, and went to bed every night by 10. My wife, Dorothy, died in the spring of 2019. Pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to the end. She was the warmth in our house, the one who remembered birthdays and kept photo albums and made everyone feel like coming home was the best part of the day. When she went, the house became very quiet. Not sad, exactly, but quiet, in a way I had never noticed before. Like the air pressure changed. I have 2 sons. My older son is Raymond. He is 43. He works in commercial real estate outside of Atlanta. He has a wife named Patrice and 2 daughters I love very much. My younger son is Dennis. He is 39. He works in logistics, or at least that is what he told me. Dennis has been between jobs more times than I can count. He has a girlfriend named Sasha, who I had met maybe 4 times in 3 years. Raymond was always the responsible one, or so I believed, after Dorothy passed. Raymond started calling more often. At first, I thought it was grief, his way of staying close to something that reminded him of his mother. He would call on Sunday evenings, ask how I was eating, whether I was getting out of the house enough, whether I had thought about what I was going to do with all that space. I lived in a 4-bedroom house in East Memphis on a corner lot that Dorothy and I had bought in 1993 for $187. Ling, ling, ling. By 2023, it was worth just over $540. Ling, ling, ling. I did not think much about that number. It was just a house. My house. Dennis called less. When he did, it was usually to tell me about some business opportunity that had just fallen through, or to mention, almost in passing, that things were a little tight right now. I helped him when I could. That was what fathers did. I helped him the way I had always helped him, quietly, without making him feel small about it. What I did not know, what I would not find out until much later, was that Raymond and Dennis had been talking to each other regularly. Not about me. Or so they would say. About the estate. About the house. About what would happen when I was gone. And whether I had updated my will since Dorothy died. I had not. In early July of 2023, Raymond called on a Tuesday. That was unusual. He said he had been thinking, and that it might be good for me to get away for a few days. He said Dennis agreed. He said the 2 of them had been talking, and they thought a trip would do me good. Something simple. A long weekend. He mentioned Nashville said there was a hotel near Broadway with a rooftop pool and live music every evening. The kind of place Dorothy would have loved. He said he and Dennis would fly in and we'd spend 4 days together, just the three of us. I said that sounded fine. I should have asked more questions. I know that now. A man who had run a business for 31 years, who had reviewed structural load calculations and flood projection models, who had signed off on infrastructure that still stands today. I should have been smarter about reading the design of what my sons were building. But when your children invite you somewhere, you don't put on your engineer's hat. You just pack a bag. We flew in on a Thursday morning. Raymond and Dennis were already at the hotel when I arrived. We had lunch at a restaurant on 2nd Avenue, the kind of place with exposed brick and overpriced sandwiches. It was pleasant. Raymond was relaxed and funny the way he used to be when he was younger. Dennis was quieter than usual, but I attributed that to him being tired. He had driven up from Birmingham. He said, "That first night we went to a honky-tonk on Broadway. I don't drink much, but I had one bourbon and listened to a young woman with a voice like a church bell play guitar and sing Patsy Cline covers until nearly midnight. I remember thinking that Dorothy would have danced. She always danced. Friday was slower. Raymond suggested we walk around Centennial Park in the morning. It was hot, the kind of thick Tennessee heat that sits on your chest, but I didn't mind. We sat by the replica of the Parthenon, and Raymond bought us all lemonade from a vendor cart. At some point, while Dennis went to use the restroom, Raymond mentioned the will. He was casual about it. Almost too casual. He said he wasn't trying to make things uncomfortable, but that he and Dennis had been talking, and they both felt like it would give all of us peace of mind if I had something updated and official in place. He said he had actually taken the liberty of speaking to a family attorney, just preliminary, just exploratory, and that the attorney had drafted something straightforward, not complicated, just a standard document that would ensure the house and my pension assets would transfer cleanly and without probate. If something were to happen to me, he had the documents with him. I looked at him for a long moment. I asked him why he had brought legal documents on a vacation. He smiled and said it wasn't a big deal, just something to look over when I had a moment. No pressure at all. Dennis came back and sat down, and the three of us talked about something else entirely, and I let the moment pass. But I kept thinking about it. That evening I asked to look at the documents. Raymond brought them to my room. I sat at the small desk by the window and read them carefully, slowly. The way I read engineering specifications, looking for the gaps. There were two key things in those documents that were not what Raymond had described. The first was that the house would transfer to Raymond and Dennis jointly and immediately upon my death, bypassing any independent executor review. The second was a durable power of attorney clause, buried on page 4, that would give Raymond financial decision-making authority in the event I became incapacitated, a term defined so loosely in the document that it could mean almost anything. I set the papers down on the desk. I did not sign them. I did not say anything that night. I told Raymond I wanted to sleep on it, which was true. What I was actually doing was thinking very carefully about what kind of men my sons had become, and whether the trip to Nashville had been a vacation at all, or something else entirely. Saturday morning changed everything. Raymond suggested we go to the airport early. For brunch, there was supposedly a restaurant on the main level with good eggs Benedict, and a view of the tarmac that his colleague had recommended. Dennis said he'd meet us there. He had to check out of his room and deal with his car. We took a rideshare together, Raymond and I, and he was cheerful the whole way. He talked about his daughters. He talked about a golf trip he was planning. He did not mention the documents. The restaurant at the airport was pleasant. We ate. Raymond had coffee. I had orange juice. And then Raymond looked at his watch and said he needed to run. His flight was earlier than he thought, and he still had to get through security. He said Dennis would be along any minute. He said to text him when I landed back in Memphis. He hugged me. He walked toward the security checkpoint. I watched him go. I waited for Dennis. I waited for 40 minutes. I called Dennis's cell phone. No answer. I called again. Nothing. I went to look for a charging station because my phone battery was at 11%. That's when I realized I had left my carry-on bag, the one with my wallet and my charger and my boarding pass at the table, when I had gotten up to use the restroom 20 minutes earlier. The table had been cleared. The bag was gone. I asked the restaurant staff. I went to the Lost and found at the information desk. Nothing. I stood in the main terminal of Nashville International Airport with no wallet, no IG, no boarding pass, no charged phone, and 6% battery remaining. I called Raymond. The call went to voicemail. I called Dennis. Voicemail again. My phone died. I was 68 years old, standing in an airport in a city that was not my city, and my sons were not coming back. I want to be honest about what happened inside me in that moment. I did not cry. I am not sure I even felt afraid. Not right away. What I felt was something colder than fear, a kind of clarity. Like when you're reviewing a structural blueprint and you suddenly see that the load-bearing wall was never where you thought it was. Everything shifted into a different configuration. The vacation, the documents, the casual mention of the attorney, Raymond leaving early, Dennis never arriving. All of it clicked into place with the quiet certainty of a bolt sliding home. They had planned this. Not all of it. Maybe. But enough. I found a bench near the Terminal C entrance, and I sat down. I folded my hands in my lap. I thought about what I knew and what I had, and what needed to happen next. I was wearing a blue linen shirt and khaki pants, and my New Balance shoes. I had my hotel keycard in my shirt pocket, which was useless now. I had nothing else. What I did have was 68 years of solving problems that other people said couldn't be solved. The first thing I did was approach the American Airlines counter and explain my situation to the agent, a young woman named Brianna, who had the patient, careful manner of someone who had handled difficult situations before. I told her my name, my flight number, my Memphis address, and my date of birth. I explained that my bag had been stolen and I had no ID. She was kind. She said she could not rebook me without verification, but she could flag my account and have a supervisor contact me once I had access to a phone. She let me use the desk phone to make one call. I called my neighbor in Memphis, a retired postal worker named Calvin, who has lived next door to me for 22 years. I told Calvin what had happened. I kept my voice steady. I told him I needed him to go into my house. I had given him a spare key years ago for emergencies and find the contact number for my attorney, a man named Wallace Britt, and call him on my behalf. I told Calvin to tell Wallace exactly what I had told him. Calvin did not ask unnecessary questions. He said, "I'm going right now. Gerald." That phone call took 6 minutes. Then I sat back down on the bench, and I waited. Over the next 3 hours, several things happened. A TSA supervisor approached me and asked if I needed assistance, because I had been sitting in the same spot for over an hour and a security camera had flagged me as a stationary individual. I explained my situation again. He was professional and helpful. He connected me to the airport's traveler assistance office, where a volunteer named Margaret sat with me, helped me file a lost property report, and let me use her personal cell phone to call Wallace Britt directly. Wallace picked up on the second ring. I told him everything. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Gerald, don't sign anything. Don't go anywhere. And don't talk to Raymond or Dennis until I call you back." I told him I had no way to talk to Raymond or Dennis, since I had no phone. He said, "That's actually ideal." Wallace called back within the hour. He had already been in contact with the airline to verify my identity through my account records. He had also, he told me carefully, begun reviewing something. He did not elaborate on the phone. He arranged for a car service to pick me up at the airport and take me to a nearby hotel where he had reserved a room under his firm's account. He said he would fly in from Memphis on Sunday morning. The hotel was a Hampton Inn 4 miles from the airport. A quiet, ordinary place. I checked in with Margaret's help. I showered. I ordered room service, a turkey club, and a glass of iced tea. I ate it slowly at the small table by the window and watched the lights of Nashville appear as the sun went down. I did not sleep much that night. Not because I was frightened, but because I was thinking. I thought about Raymond's voice in the restaurant on 2nd Avenue. How warm and easy it was. I thought about Dennis's silence at the park. How he had looked at his shoes when Raymond mentioned the will. I thought about Dorothy. About what she would have said. She would have cried. I think, not for herself. For them. For the men her boys had become without her noticing. I thought about that for a long time. Wallace arrived Sunday morning with a leather briefcase and a look on his face that told me things were more complicated than I had known. We sat in the hotel breakfast room with coffee, and he explained what he had found. He had pulled the documents Raymond had brought to Nashville. He had also, through a contact at a title company, discovered that Raymond had already filed a preliminary inquiry with the Shelby County Property Records Office, a procedural step that sometimes precedes a transfer of title. Nothing had been executed, but the inquiry existed. Someone had been preparing. He had also spoken, briefly and carefully, to a contact at the Nashville field office of Adult Protective Services, because what had happened to me, being left without identification, without means, without resources, in a public facility, in a city, not my own, had a name. It was called financial elder abandonment, and it was, under Tennessee law, a reportable offense. I sat with that for a moment. My sons, my boys, the ones I had coached in Little League and helped with their college applications and bailed out of small financial holes without ever making them feel like failures. Reportable offense. I asked Wallace what he thought I should do. He said he thought I should do exactly what I was already doing, nothing hasty, nothing emotional, nothing that couldn't be undone. He said we had time, and that time was on my side. Then he slid his phone across the table and showed me something. Margaret, the airport volunteer, had apparently mentioned my situation to a colleague, who had mentioned it to someone else. The airport security office had pulled the footage of me sitting alone on that bench standard procedure when a traveler assistance report is filed, and that footage had been reviewed by a supervisor who had flagged it as potentially relevant to a welfare check. Someone, somewhere in that chain, had made a call to Channel 4 News in Nashville. The station had a regular segment on elder care and community safety issues. A producer had picked up the story. The segment aired Sunday evening. There was no name used. The station honored the privacy protocols, but they showed the footage an older man in a blue linen shirt, alone on a bench, hands folded, utterly still, and they described the circumstances in general terms: an elderly traveler left without resources or identification in the airport, an apparent family dispute, an ongoing welfare inquiry. They asked anyone with information to contact the Airport Traveler Assistance Office. Raymond saw it that night. He called my attorney's office at 7:42 p.m. According to Wallace's call log, Wallace did not answer. Raymond left a voicemail. His voice, Wallace told me later, was not the warm and easy voice from 2nd Avenue. It was the voice of a man doing a calculation, trying to figure out how bad this was. Dennis called too. Atnocincis prezece. His message was shorter. He just said, "Dad, please call me. I'm sorry. I did not call either of them. Not that night. I flew home to Memphis on Monday morning. on a ticket Wallace's office had arranged. Calvin picked me up at the airport. He shook my hand and drove me home without saying very much, which was exactly what I needed. My house was exactly as I had left it. Quiet, settled, the air smelling faintly of the eucalyptus candles Dorothy used to burn. I walked through every room. I stood in the kitchen for a while. I made a pot of coffee and sat on the back porch and watched the light change in the maple tree at the edge of the yard. I was home. Over the following weeks, Wallace moved methodically. The durable power of attorney documents Raymond had prepared were reviewed by two independent attorneys and determined to contain terms that were, in Wallace's word, predatory, specifically designed to circumvent my independent financial authority in ways that went beyond any reasonable estate planning purpose. The preliminary title inquiry Raymond had filed was formally objected to and dissolved. A formal complaint was filed with the Tennessee Adult Protective Services Office. Raymond hired an attorney. Dennis did not, which Wallace said was telling. There were two conversations I had to have, and I had them separately, deliberately, with Wallace present on the phone. The first was with Raymond. He came to Memphis in mid-September and sat across from me at the kitchen table where his mother used to help him with his homework. He looked like himself, but different, older, somehow, than 43. He said he had not intended for things to go the way they did at the airport. He said he panicked. He said Dennis had told him I was going to refuse the documents and that they had agreed to just leave. Let me find my own way. Give themselves time to think. He said he knew how that sounded. I let him finish. Then I told him that I knew exactly how it sounded, and that what he described was not a panic and not an accident. It was a decision. Two men had gotten on two airplanes and left their 68-year-old father alone in an airport without a phone or a wallet or a way home. And they had done it deliberately. And they had done it because they thought I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. I told him that the only reason I was sitting across from him, instead of speaking through attorneys exclusively, was because Dorothy would not have wanted that. Not because he deserved it. Raymond cried. I had not seen him cry since his mother's funeral. I let him. I did not comfort him. The second conversation with Dennis was shorter. He did not try to explain as much. He mostly said he was sorry. Repeatedly. In different ways. The way people do when they know an apology is insufficient, but don't have anything else to offer. I told him I heard him. I told him I would not be helping him financially going forward, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I understood now that my help had not been helping him at all. He nodded. He looked at his shoes, the same way he had in the park. The legal process took several months. Raymond's preliminary title inquiry had left a formal record, and the Adult Protective Services investigation, while it did not result in criminal charges, produced a documented finding that was placed in the state's elder abuse registry. Raymond's attorney negotiated the terms. Part of the resolution involved Raymond covering the legal fees I had incurred, which came to just over $14,000. Wallace called it a reasonable outcome given the evidence. I called it the cost of a lesson. I updated my will. I did it with Wallace and two witnesses and no family present. I left the house to a charitable trust Dorothy and I had discussed years ago, but never formalized a fund to support the music education program at the elementary school 2 blocks away, the one that both Raymond and Dennis had attended. The one that was always the first thing cut when the district ran short of money. Dorothy had felt strongly about that. I felt it was appropriate. I also changed the locks on the house. Not because I thought my sons would come back uninvited, but because it felt like the right thing to do. Like resetting a foundation after you found the crack. It is January now. The maple tree in the backyard is bare. Just the outline of branches against a pale sky. I have been going to a Tuesday morning coffee group at the community center on Poplar Avenue, mostly retired men and women, teachers and postal workers, and one former firefighter named Lou who tells the same story about a 1,987 house fire every single week and makes it funnier each time. I look forward to Tuesdays. Raymond and I have a cautious, careful kind of contact now. He calls on occasional Sundays. We talk about his daughters, mostly. There is a distance between us that I do not think will fully close, and I have made my peace with that. Some structural damage, I know from experience, cannot be repaired to the original specification. You can stabilize it. You can make it safe, but it will never be exactly what it was. Dennis sent a card at Christmas. A simple one. Just a winter scene. And his signature, no message. I put it on the mantel, above the fireplace, next to a photograph of Dorothy taken at a state park in 1998. The one where she is laughing at something off camera and her eyes are completely full of light. I think about what I would tell a man who is where I was, who has sons calling on Sunday evenings with warm voices, who has documents appearing on vacation tables, who feels a cold clarity settling in but doesn't quite know what to do with it yet. I would tell him, trust that feeling. It is the same feeling you get when you review a blueprint and something doesn't add up. It is not paranoia. It is pattern recognition. It is 68 years of knowing what load-bearing looks like. And knowing when someone has moved the wall. I would tell him you have more time than they think you do. Use it quietly. Use it carefully. Use it well. I would tell him the bench is not the end of the story. It is just where you sit while you figure out the next move. I sat on that bench. I folded my hands. I waited. And then I went home and I built something they could not take.